Hi, this is Greg Hildebrandt. I've been a professional artist for 62 years. I've done a lot of artwork in that time, and I'm still just trying to get it right. Sometimes art can be quite tough. You really feel like it's a really difficult thing to try to get at. You know what I mean? And it's part of my reference here for my space outlaw ray gun. Yeah. Whatever.
How you doing, Greg? And how you doing, Dean? Dean is already
Hi, D.
chiming in saying hello. So how you doing today, Mr. Hildebrandt?
All right. Working on this again. I worked on it last week, right? And then put it aside. I had to do a couple of Magic the Gathering paintings. And I'm going back to it again now. And I'll probably finish it off tomorrow.
Cool.
So
Fantastic. So what do you need yet to do on it?
I got to finish the gun all off. And you can't, I got the thing covered up here. But the ribs go all the way down. I got to tighten this up a little bit. I'm keeping this more painterly. You know, you can go in any direction with this kind of thing, and tickle, 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 detail, do more blending, making these values come together smoother, more photographic, as it were. You know, that whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I've done that, and I like doing that, and it works for certain things. This I've decided. I don't know if it registers on the screen, but this is very painterly. You know, you can see that it's brushstrokey and it's not real cleaned up. And I'm going to leave it like that because it's a design choice,
Right.
you know, and so it appeals to me more on that level. And then here I'll get a little tighter in certain areas, you know, like maybe around the teeth, around the eye a little more yet, and in here in the gun because there's all this little stars and all kinds of little shit going on. Excuse my English. You know, and so there, it's like mainly finishing touches, sort of like thing, you know.
Got you. Hey man, it's looking fantastic so far. Are you gonna paint on it today while we're?
I think on and off, yeah, we'll work on it. And the thing is, we were doing quotes for a while. Remember, we started off, and I found this one sometimes creating is about abandoning or postponing higher or personal ideals for lower objectives in order to make a living. And that's some guy by the name GH are the initials. Oh, those are mine. Right? I mean, it's like you
might be the first time you've quoted yourself.
Right.
But I love that quote.
Postponing or abandoning higher ideals that you may have for lower objectives in order to make a living. And you know, and that's not just something in art. I mean, you know, definitely is an art, but in commercial art, across the board,
it's across the board, and I think probably almost everyone can relate to that on some level.
Yeah.
And all you have to do is pose the question: if you didn't have to put food on the table, what would you be doing?
Right.
You know. So what would you be doing?
You know, and again, when I say abandoning or postponing higher ideals or personal ideals for lower objectives, I'm not necessarily saying, oh, that's beneath me, a lower objective. It's not that. It's not that kind of, what is that, ego thing. It's not, you know, it's you have personal ideas. I got stacks of them everywhere. I mean, for years. I mean, concepts, ideas, drawings, beginnings of paintings, sketches, dissertations, words, sequential art stories. I've got a half a dozen of them going for 25 or 30 years, and you're always returning to that. But then you're doing something that comes up, not necessarily this one, because this is personal, and a commission comes along, and when you have to put this other thing on the shelf, and because there's no immediate money for it, it's something that's just you and it on your drawing board or on your easel. There's no contract, there's no commission, but generally that's what so-called commercial art or illustration is, as opposed to so-called fine art. Is that the fine artist doesn't gain or seek a contract ahead of time. They do the work first, and then it's shown, and somebody likes it, and they buy it.
Yeah.
It's like.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
No, that's just sort of like muttering.
Well, I was going to say, like, with this concept, to me, and I can't think of any other occupation other than the arts. Now, when I say the arts, I'm including all of the arts,
Mhm.
right? In that, and perhaps music probably gets this criticism more than anything else, but it's being called the proverbial sellout. Like,
right. Oh, he sold out.
You sold out for for commercial gain.
Right.
Well, it's a job.
Yeah. Exactly. Like everybody does. Just
there's no, there's some kind of romantic notion behind the arts of, that perhaps it's supposed to be something greater, but at the end of the day, for a lot of people, it's a job.
It's making
first
a living.
And foremost.
It's a job, and you're making a living, and fortunately, you enjoy what you're doing for the most part. It's like you're drawing and painting pictures, and granted, they may not be your creations. If you're, say, in the comics or any illustration field, you're illustrating somebody else's ideas, but you're finding a way to make it your own. I've always found that, and I remember one of the great illustrators that I always liked, N.C. Wyeth. He would much of the time choose not to illustrate the apex scene. Say, here's a scene, here's a scene. He would go for the unspoken thing in between that wasn't necessarily even mentioned by the author, but so that he could jump into the middle of that to make it his own. I found very interesting.
That is interesting.
Yeah,
because that's at least for me, counterintuitive. You know, like illustrating the quiet rather than
the apex scene.
Illustrating the quiet.
Yeah, or you invent what yourself. What goes on between this and this scene? There's occurrences between the characters and events, whether it be a book, a novel, or in a film. I mean, you're making cuts from this scene to this scene, and there's a time lapse between these two. What happens in the middle? It's not necessarily shown. Or in comics or any sequential art form. So you go into the middle there and do what's not there. So I mean, that's a way to have it feel like it's yours. It's
also you're walking a fine line of, again, because we're talking about a commercial job, and you're illustrating a very specific thing.
Mm-hmm.
That's a good. Now, obviously, N.C. Wyeth is a master and can nail that kind of stuff, but for people like me, walking a fine line of creating an illustration that, no matter how beautiful it might be, the audience looks at it and is like, this didn't happen.
I didn't see that. Where's that? Right?
Happened in the book.
But of course,
this isn't the work.
Right. Sometimes you could really go crazy with it too. I think I used to do a lot of that with the Lord of the Rings. Go in between and invent all these crazy scenes that are going on. Sometimes quite, controversial. And in your mind, you go into these little journeys. What would happen here? What's going on here? But it's fun. It's just we also. Anyway, I don't know. I mean, I'll putz around with this a little bit. All right.
Okay.
You you can talk and ask questions, whatever you got to do, man.
So we got more people chiming in saying it looks green. And Johnny Esprendio, sorry if I mispronounced that, your last name there, has a question. Have you ever done oil paintings?
I tried oils once, and I couldn't deal with the drying time. I'd gotten so used to. I started painting in casein, opaque watercolor. What
Yeah.
that and or watercolor initially, and then opaque watercolor, and then when I discovered acrylic, I just switched to that because it was permanent, and then tried oils once on a Lord of the Rings calendar, the third calendar that my brother and I did for Valentine Books. I was painting Gandalf's head on, I believe it was the scene where they're off to the Grey Havens. It was a centerfold. So here I'm putting the highlights on the. Can you see those at all? So
Faintly. They
it,
show up as you're
it's
going. Yeah.
it's basically phthalo blue with white in it. This is ultramarine, which is the redder blue, and then I'm moving towards the yellow blue is the highlight, and that's what this is here. And I tried. I was painting in Gandalf's head. It's about that big, in the painting. 2 inches tall, maybe inch and a half tall, and the background was painted the moon, and he's got his arms out, and that's roughed in acrylic. And I'm painting the head all, and I got it all detailed. And the method of painting, it was the same. In other words, I mixed all my colors up in oil on a palette like this, on a piece of foil, from the highlight to the shadow. So I knew I wasn't like oils just squeezed out on a palette that you then squiggle around on the palette and try to mix. I mixed every single color from the highlight to the shadow for the skin and for the hair, and the same methodology of applying the paint. So it was no different. It's just that not used to that drying, that long drying time. I put the oil away, and there's a moon behind him, which is an acrylic, and I put the oil away, and I went to the acrylic, and I go like this. I put my hand on the canvas to paint the moon, and I say, oh, and Gandalf's head was here. So I just took a rag and I wiped it off. Just washed it down and wiped it off and went back to acrylic. I couldn't deal with that. And this stuff you can put this down like I just did. Look at that. That's dry already. And you can just paint over it. You can sand it off if it gets too lumpy, too thick. You can sand it off. You can then go right back over it, paint it out. It's quick. You don't have to wait all that time for color, the paint to dry. I just couldn't deal with it, and that came out of a practical necessity that a painting might have had been handed in the next day or that day, and to transport it. I remember painters who did work in oil had special cases that they were delivering the painting still wet, that would, in a case that would keep it not from hitting, anything hitting it. And that was just too much of a nuisance for me. So it's drying time. Anyway.
Now, do you recall why in the third calendar on that one particular painting you decided at that point you wanted to give oils a shot?
Yeah. It was this whole business. There was this conversation that I was aware of. People, on a popular level, people would always, oh, is that an original oil? Ooh, that's an original oil. That meant something to people. They didn't even know why they said it. It was something they were repeating. But I think I bought into that to some degree and thought of it in terms of classicism. It's classical to paint with oil on canvas. But painting with acrylic on masonite, that's not classic or traditional. That's in somehow less than or lower than. Oil on canvas, that kind of like BS conversation. But it started to kind of like land, and once the head came off of my eyes, the hell with this. I mean, drop that conversation.
But you tried it really at an inopportune time,
Yeah,
to be honest, right?
yeah.
That was
Well,
probably not the time to actually try to tackle a new
well, no,
medium.
not in the middle of a project, but it
So,
was, it was. I think that centerfold probably was the last painting that we were doing for that particular calendar, and I felt like I think maybe if I'm remembering, maybe what if I'd never painted another Lord of the Rings painting for these calendars because this was the third calendar, I don't know.
yeah.
And in fact, that was in my head. I was already thinking of another personal story to do, and I felt, well, let me just try it and see that if I can do it in oil, just as a kind of like a final, thing. An original oil. That used to be
Now,
a whole kind of like thing, Oh, is that an original oil?
yeah, I mean, it's probably still out there to some degree.
Yeah,
But
I think there. I remember when I brought I wanted to get into the galleries down in New York, over in New York before the rings. And I was trucking around my paintings, and I brought them all, and I painted on masonite, and I had a whole bunch of stuff. And a guy was one of the gallery owners grabs a masonite and shaking. And he says, "This is kind of cheap. Isn't that cheesy?" I said, "Well, Andrew Wyeth paints on masonite. It's good enough for him. It's good enough for me. I mean, And that he kind of like got off that, but there was that kind of like too. Anyway, whatever.
well, so it's been a long time then since you have sworn off oils since
Yeah,
finding Gandalf's face on the back of your arm.
yeah.
So, from just posing the question now, do you think maybe you would consider oils again, just as a for fun project?
Have you painted in oil, Keith?
I have in the past,
Do you,
not a
do
lot, but
you like it?
uh, I did.
What's
I
the
did.
benefit? What's the benefit over acrylic?
The drying time.
Yeah, there you go. It depends how you look at it, I guess, right?
Yeah. So, it allowed things to uh, a little bit more time to blend, right? Depending on how you're going to blend and
Well, they
uh,
make this goop that you squeeze into acrylic. I got a bunch of it here,
yeah,
and it extends the drying time, but it's a weird constitution that gets formed. The paint doesn't feel right initially. I tried it a few
yeah,
times, and it works. But I didn't want to deal with having to get used to you can get used to anything, how to handle paint. You know what I'm saying? It's just what you get used to.
yeah,
And,
yeah.
and I just didn't feel like messing with it. But yeah, there's stuff that you can add to it. But
For me, I, ha- I think I bought a bunch of oil paints maybe a year ago, year and a half, 2 years ago now, with the idea of maybe I'll try oils again. And I don't think I've opened any of the tubes. And
yeah,
but primarily I stopped using it. Uh, again, the plus and minus of it is the drying time. That is
yeah,
the great thing about it. It's also the bad thing about it. But the real downside of it for me is that I stopped having the luxury of a studio space with incredible ventilation,
oh well,
right?
that's yeah,
And
yeah,
and so with oils and the turpentines and all that stuff that you're using with them, they are toxic,
yeah. Well, that's
and so
yeah,
for me, you know, I'm in home-based studios all the time,
right,
and it's like, what? I don't want to stink up the entire house.
yeah,
I'm in this little room. I don't want to give myself any kind of
right.
toxic damage.
No, I
But
mean that you can really do damage with any kind of toxic ones.
yeah,
When I was doing my novel Ursharak, Tim and I were writing it in the form of storyboards. That we sculpted it out with words, roughing it out with words on a piece of paper, beginning, middle, end, characters, key stuff, all that stuff, and then we started to lay it out with storyboards. We had 1,000 stories. I still got some of them. A lot of them got stolen. I probably got a couple of hundred of them left. And
Oh wow.
where we told the story, and on regular commercial storyboard panels, and we were using ad markers and colored pencil. So we were in my locked up studio space using these ad markers for 2 months, 3 months, just constantly pounding out this story. You get completely into it, and I think there was a certain aspect of you're getting not only you're breathing that shit in, and at the end of it, we came out of it, we finished the whole thing, we went through the project, sold a book, tried to pitch the movie, and I started to be aware that I couldn't smell gradually, and I completely lost all my sense of smell, and so did Tim.
Wow.
Totally gone. Still is. It's gone completely. I never got it back.
Never came back.
Never came back.
Never.
No, because I've been to, eye, ear, nose guy, the doctor, eye, ear, nose, throat, and I explained it. Oh, he says, well, that's it. You'll never get it back. You destroy whatever you destroyed. I don't know what the hell it was.
Now, can you taste?
Oh yeah, it didn't affect my taste, just my breathing, and my and so yeah, working in a confined space with those materials, when they say, use ventilation, God damn it, use ventilation.
Use ventilation. Yeah. A buddy of mine. Well, this was back when we were in high school. We were doing a joint project.
For what project?
Joint.
Together. Not that kind of joint.
Together.
Yeah,
not that kind of joint.
Sorry about that.
And we were painting with oils and automotive paint.
Yeah.
And we were painting in a garage, and we were probably locked up for like a week.
Yeah.
And we lost our, the voices started getting raw and everything, and feeling lightheaded. So
it can really affect you.
Yeah. But I haven't found any of that with acrylic or watercolors or any of that stuff.
No, and acrylics never. I know they stopped making cadmium because cadmium supposedly caused cancer, and I think we've talked about this too. The cadmiums, like reds, they're not as intense as the cadmiums,
Yeah, the yellow and the red, right?
Right. You can put out red medium and red deep cadmium, and they're almost the same, So you got to create your deeper intensity, and I do that with cadmium red medium by adding magenta. A little bit of magenta into it. It beefs it up to it.
Okay. That's a very handy tip. To beef up the new.
Yeah.
What do they call them? I think they still call them cadmium red.
Non-cadmium cadmium red. Non-cadmium cadmium red, I think is the label.
Yeah.
Little
magenta.
Yeah. Right. Non-lapis lazuli ultramarine. Lapis lazuli is the stone that's only mined in Afghanistan. That beautiful blue, that one of the main blue I use, I think. And I remember some years ago with the war, and Gene went to buy my ultramarine blue, and apparently this particular company was still mining it. I think they've got artificial means of creating that color now. And French, I think in French ultramarine, I think maybe in France they came up with it. I'm not sure, but this particular supply apparently was coming from Afghanistan, because the guy said, no, because of the war we can't get the ultramarine. And I panicked. I freaked out. I said, oh my God. The Gene instantly went on all these places to buy it, and she bought me enough ultramarine to last me for maybe 10 years. So you could say that I'm hoarding ultramarine blue. Ultramarine meaning lapis lazuli beautiful stone. I was at a friend's house once some years ago, and he had bought a couple of my paintings, and we were talking about that color. He said, "Oh, I've got a stone," and he brought it in, and he gave it to me. It's a big rock about this big. Look up making ultramarine out of lapis lazuli stones. There's videos on it. It's really fascinating. It's a huge process grinding that rock down. I mean, it's incredible. And the fact that they arrived at how to do that over the centuries, blows my mind.
Well, the origins of a lot of different colors, through beetles and all that stuff is
it's amazing.
All fascinating.
And we just all take it. We just go to the store, buy them. I knew painters back at Jam Handy's, the industrial film producer that I started off in Detroit as a teenager.
Yep.
One of the painters, one of the animators, Wally Siegel. He worked for Max Fleischer's studio. He worked on the classic Supermans and the Betty Boop and Batman and Popeye, and he made his own pigments, ground his own pigments at home for his own. He was an animator, and at home he painted, and he was hung up on Rubens, and he painted in the Rubens style. And he was incredible. But he made all of his own brushes. It was like that kind of like a traditionalist. This is the only way you can do it,
Yeah,
which is
very
amazing.
cool.
It's like you go to the store and we just buy the stuff, and it's like no second thought. But think of the artists back in the day; they had to make all their own stuff, grind their own pigments, and make their brushes.
I learned how to do egg tempera and maybe a watercolor. We had to, mix all the stuff up and put the dyes in, but that was the first and last time I did that.
Yeah.
Thank you for the information, Ben. Ben is letting us know that there's alternatives to like turpentine now.
Oh, there are? Well, that's interesting.
I'll look into that.
Well,
I'm not sure, Elijah. I'm not sure what the problem with the red dye in the M&Ms were.
The whoop?
I don't know what the problem was. Was it cancer causing? If so, that sucks.
Everything causes cancer, right?
Yes.
Everything causes cancer.
Everything.
I mean, what the hell? I'm looking for stuff that I've written down that I was going to talk. I can't find it. Write these notes, and then I think Gene and I were talking. She said, "Why don't you talk about your age? Kind of like you're 82, and you're still doing this." I said, "Well, yeah, okay, but I think that's one of those inspirational talks,
Yeah.
I'm 80."
Man, I got to say, when most people, you think like, oh, I'm going to go talk to this 82-year-old. Like, oh, that's so nice of you. You're going to the old folks home. And it's like,
Yeah.
That's not like.
But yeah, it's. I don't think you have to look at. Granted, I'm not saying like people who become physically incapacitated and mentally that's a whole other story. But if you're not, and you're the aging process, I feel it. You know what I mean? But if you eat the right stuff and exercise a little bit, you can. And then it's genetics also. My dad died at very young. He was only 63, but my mother lived to be 95, and pretty much altogether too. And she was still living in her big old house, cutting her own grass at 90. And I think so. It's genetics, but it's your attitude too. No, I think it's like what
I do think.
How happy are you?
Keeping your body physical, in
the work.
My wife's grandpa died in his 90s, and he was out, on his farm, out in the field, when he passed.
Yeah.
He remained physically active.
That's the way to go. So, that's the way you want to go, doing what you do. And I always like that story about Thomas Hart Benton. I'm not sure how old he was. I don't think he was that old, but nonetheless, he was sitting with his wife having their coffee or finished dinner. He said, "I'm going to go up and finish that." He was working on a mural. I think it was a history of Western music, I think. Country Western.
No, I'm familiar with this story, but I cannot remember what he was working on.
Yeah, and he gets up. He said, I'm gonna go look at it. If it's done, I'll sign it. So he's gone for a little too long, and she gets up. I wonder where he is. And she goes out, and he's laying dead at the corner of the painting. He hadn't signed it. So that's the way to go with an unfinished work or a work that's not signed. So it's still in progress, you know. But
Now,
age
do
is,
you think it's better to go with it in progress, or is it
yeah,
better to go right
yeah,
at the
yeah. Because
moment of
no, I think
the
in
signature?
progress. I think in progress is better because it's like part of the thing trying to get it right. You never get it right. You know, nothing is ever finished. Nothing is ever. You know, it's a never ending. You know,
So, with that being said, should you leave everything
no, I got stacks of it all over here.
just in
But no,
case, and to leave it
age.
slightly undone?
Yeah, but I mean, it's like aging too. You know, your mind. People get to that whole. I think we've talked about this. Not to mention names because I love these artists and stuff. But guys in the older industry back in the '40s, you know, they were at an apex in the '40s and '50s. And being in a comic book shop with them, they look at a whole row of the new covers. One guy, and he said, "What's this? The flavor of the week?" You know, I mean, it was a series of comic covers that were tied in
Yeah.
together for DC, I think. What's this? The flavor of the week? Like there's that kind of attitude of the old guys put down the new guys, the new kid on the block, kind of like mentality, right? There's that jealousy, there's that
Yeah.
envy, there's that, you know, I'm the who do they, you know, it's like people with new fashions or new haircuts or new what the hell ever. You know what I'm saying? You got to attack that. You know, the older guy traditionally attacks that. You know, that's
Yeah.
just I guess that's part of a cycle that they grow up with. They stick within a certain peer group kind of like thing. I've never
Yep.
stuck with my peer groups per se. I never, you know, and I think that there's a great Bishop Sheen quote too that I always liked about if you marry the spirit of one era, you're going to be a widow in the next. There's something about that I kind of like, sort
Yeah.
of that you got to constantly stay in it and at it and thinking and working and analyzing and reading. I've got 5 books. I read, you know, in the bathroom principally.
So,
That
hey,
people, that's my reading room. I've got
yep.
5 books I'm reading at one time now. I'll pick one up, you know, and they're all over the place.
Yeah.
And it's like your interest in the world, interest in what's happening. I don't stay. I know what's going on. Believe me, in the real world, big time. And but just in your work too, to constantly jump into situations, little stuff that you didn't do before about color, or just to constantly keep exploring and keep the brain working. That helps you to stay young. You know,
Yeah.
it's like
Yep.
keeping the brain alive. I think
Absolutely.
there's a kind of like conversation too about sticking within being normal with that hideous word. You know, it's like, what does that mean?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
he's normal. He's just that guy that you're talking. Oh, he acts like an 81-year-old. That's you know, if you don't act that you know, I'm trying to express it. You know what I'm saying?
Yes. Yep.
It's
Like what doing what is expected
right.
of you at any given time.
Yep.
Tom Hewitt says, "Yes, Greg. The older folks need to make room in art for the new folks."
Totally. Well, make
Uh,
room. No, I mean, yeah. Well, the older folks are there. Younger folks are there. I was young at one time, and there were older guys there. It's like
well,
the room is there. You know, I don't need to make it for them. They're there. They have their abilities, and they're going to do it. You know.
well, yeah. I think that the fear that is not necessarily the older guys making room for the newer guys. The newer guys are going to come in and take over regardless.
Yeah. Right. The older guy's going to fade away.
It's
Oh,
inevitable.
yeah. The
It's
thing is, like, what?
inevitable, and
It's inevitable.
the
There's
old
what
guys
is it?
have to adapt to stay relevant.
Yep. Well, and it's like, what is
It's
that statement that old soldiers never die? They just fade away. That's like old artists never die. They just fade away. You know. Well, what is that?
you know,
What's the rock song? You know, I'm gonna. It's better to burn out than fade away.
it's better to burn out than fade away. Yeah, and and while I don't necessarily agree with that sentiment, I certainly understand it. Going out at the height of your power rather than
Well, you don't have to
being
fade away.
relevant.
But the
Well,
point is this: I think the conversation I think I'm trying to get at is you don't have to fade away. You just keep
yeah,
working. You stay interested. You stay enthusiastic. You stay committed. You stay turned on, and that's up to you.
yeah.
And it's not out there. I mean, you got to do that.
But I think you use this phrase, and if you didn't use this phrase just in the last few minutes, uh, I've certainly heard you say it before. But just staying curious. You got to stay
Oh yeah.
curious, and you got to keep looking and digging and exposing
Well,
yourself
it's like being
because
the idea of being an explorer, the thrill of what the hell's around the next bend, the unknown. It's like you get to be, I think people think they get to be a certain age and they think, well, that's it, that's all there is to know. I get to that point in my life, oh, in the autumn of my years, that kind of shit, and it's all that way now, you know bullshit.
yeah,
Bullshit. It
it
doesn't
is.
have to be that way.
It doesn't. But do you think that the primary reason it happens is fear?
Fear is probably a primary reason for most things happening.
Yeah, like you
Fear and
start
desperation.
you start to find yourself in a situation that you're not comfortable with, and it usually manifests itself in anger.
Yeah,
You know,
absolutely.
like, oh, the kids, like, I love this phrase, the kids these days.
That's an oldie. That's a classic.
Yeah, and I'm like, man,
Why can't they be like we
I'm hearing
were?
it now
Why
from
can't they?
my contemporaries.
What was that song? Was that a Roger and Hammerstein? What's the matter with kids today? Why can't they be like we were, perfect in every way?
It's true. I hear people, my age, bitching about kids, like, all the kids these days. And I'm like,
Yeah,
that's exactly what your parents were saying,
exactly.
and your
And their parents,
grandparents
and
were
their
saying.
parents, and their parents.
Now you're saying it. It's like, dude, wake up! Like, this guy I know from years past was complaining about someone with dyed hair.
Yep.
Like, oh, I saw him going in and walking with. I'm like, you're 50 for God's sake. Like, why do you care what that kid's hair color is?
What difference does it make,
Like,
man?
what difference?
It's
What difference does it make?
well,
Not a bit.
well, it's all about conforming to standards of this particular group as you move through life. You go back to your past, my past, any of our past. You were supposed to conform to this particular way that all the teenagers acted when I was growing up in the 50s. This is you act into your peer group. Everybody's supposed to like the same music. They all want to be liked. They want to be accepted into the group,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah,
There's a
yeah.
fear of being the outsider. I reveled in being the outsider. Well, first of all, I had no choice in that. I was a twin and I was an artist in the 1940s and 50s, so I definitely was an outsider, you know. And that's the thrill of it, being an outsider. They're all going to listen to the same stuff. I mean, the fact I used to say to people, I'm listening to Beethoven in 1956. Nothing wrong with rock and roll, but and they went,
No.
what? You listen to that old? They used to call it long hair music. And as a kid, I could never. What the hell are they talking? They're referring to classical music as long hair music. It was, and then finally the rocks and the long hair with rock and roll. And I thought, well, then I saw some sketches of Franz Liszt, a series of caricatures from Franz Liszt's time of him conducting, and apparently he had long white hair, and when he conducted, it was like his hair was flying like a long hair band today. You know what I'm saying? So that became, I think, applied. I'm pretty sure to that kind of music. Oh, that's long hair music, which is always bizarre to me. But anyway, No, that conforming to that group, you only listen to this kind of music, you only wear these kind of clothes. Then they do that when they get older into their middle age group, then they all conform to that particular setup,
Yes.
right? And then they put down, look at
Yep.
the kids. I
Look at
remember
the
people
kids.
working for Gene once. He had a 50-mile-an-hour hairdo, like Clint Eastwood, kind of like thing. Older guy, about my age, bitching about the kid's hair. The long hair kids. And there he was still with his, he had a lot of it, still with the curl and everything.
Yeah.
Oh, it's funny. Oh, he had it knocked too. He had his. Oh, this is just an aside, but the way people stay stupid shit though, he had it figured of the whole breakdown of the '60s, the drugs and the whole damn thing, all the protesters and all that. It was the Beatles' fault. He had it absolutely pinned down to being the Beatles. And I said,
It was
well,
the Beatles'
maybe it
fault.
was Elvis because he was an Elvis fan. He was an Elvis fan. I said, well, I don't know about that. Maybe it was Elvis. Anyway, idiocy, idiocy, right? Idiocy.
It is. It
But
is.
anyway, this is all about talking about age and staying young or keeping your brain active is the main
Yep.
thing.
Yep. Never conforming. That's the answer. Never conform.
Yeah, I mean, it's just what's the to satisfy who? Who are you conforming to satisfy?
Yeah.
You're making yourself happy with that. Everybody's got to belong to the right club and do all this the crap the other people do, and they have this. Remember ticky tacky houses that when suburbia was springing up in Michigan, everybody's doing the white flight from Detroit, and that's a whole other issue.
Yep.
That's for some other time, but
Yep.
heading for suburbia and all these ticky tacky subdivisions things rising up. There's a pink. Remember the Pete Seeger song? There's a yellow one and a blue one and a pink one, and they're all made out of ticky tacky, and they all look just alike. Suburbs all
Yes.
had to conform. You had certain grass. You had to have a certain amount of grass. You had to keep your grass at a certain height. I mean, it's yoy.
Yep.
Spare me, man.
Hello, Adrian Wagner. Thanks for chiming in. Johnny S. Forget, man, mispronouncing that last name. Here I go again. Greg, do you use any mediums with your acrylic paint?
Again, I talked about this before. There's this additional
Yep.
material that you can squeeze into it to dry it. I tried it once and I didn't like it, so I just use water. I have I keep the paint in these containers, and I store it in there, and then I just hit it with a spray bottle like this to keep it wet, and that's that. And then while I'm working with the paint, I spray it down with water. They'll put a layer of misty type water on the top of the paint to keep it wet while I'm working. I know some people even have gone so far as to spray the canvas and get it wet to keep it so they could blend. I don't do that.
Mm-hmm.
But if you work fast, it stays wet for a very short period of time here, and you can blend wet. But then I do a lot of dry brushing right over the surface. Like this orange going into this, that's all dry brushed on. With a bigger flat brush kind of thing. Just
Mm-hmm.
and like so.
So,
Yep.
Greg, I have a question for you. Uh, when last we met last week, looking at that skull, the blue on the back of that skull was far more intense, right? And
Yeah.
you've gone back and you've toned it down. Now, I'm trying to think of, because I know when you're working the black, right on the black, you put in the lights first, like you want to light it up
Yep.
and see what that light is looking like. But that, if I'm remembering correctly, what I'm looking at now is really far removed from how that color went down. Is it still the highlight color that's there, or
Here,
did you paint over that whole entire?
yeah, I painted over this whole thing, and I'm still working on that. There's building up to that. There's a shine right there on the skull.
Yeah.
So the light hits it, and that's the yellow blue, which is cyanide blue and white, and this is ultramarine and white. You know, so that's what that is. You know, I'm gonna start.
Now,
There's still some stuff I'm gonna add to this, just cracks. You know, the skull cracks and stuff. They're very subtle, but they'll be in there yet. You know.
now, was there any particular reason, or was it like that you departed from that very intense blue, or was it always the plan of just getting that down as a base coat
That was a
and
base.
then
That was a base because
toning it down?
yeah, because the colors I never mixed new color up. I was working from the same palette. In other words, it was something I brushed in there off of that palette, intending to go back over it again. Still, you know. The thing is
Yeah.
to keep it like this coming around. You want to get this round feel, this, you know. So you got to build up to
Yes.
a highlight up in this region right here, you know. And that's got a
Yep.
little bit. This has got to be brighter here to give the sense of the roundness of the skull, you know.
Got you. Got you.
Because what is painting so-called realism, except where the light's hitting it, and that's creating the shape. How the light falls, it moves across. How the light moves across the subject creates the shape. You know, the way the light and color move, because it's all about movement. The light's moving all over this thing. You know, that's the way I'm thinking
Yeah.
of painting it. Which how's this light moving across this object? That all depends on what angle the light's from, how it moves. You know, so all that's in your head while you're painting, and that's the fun of it. And again, all that's the stuff that's keeping the brain active. Just painting. I don't care what the hell the subject is. If you're, you know, it can be. Doesn't have to be some super symbolic thing. You know, just painting that. Just having your mind work this shape till this juts out. Why is that? Where's the light hit? You're analyzing constantly while you're painting and drawing, right? Constant analysis process. So
Yeah. I have to say, man, that I just finished up a recent job. Uh, oh, sorry, my dog just bit my hand. She's
a real
Ozzy's
bite
down.
or just a friendly?
Yeah, like a play. She wants to play.
Yeah.
Just bit my hand. Knock it off. So just finished up this gig, right? And as I'm working on it, and I'm going back and forth in those stages of, hey, this looks pretty good, to, oh my god,
Never
this
ending.
is trash. This is horrible.
Never ending.
I'm going back and forth, and then I realize I'm struggling on an issue, and there were two things that I came to the conclusion. It's like, okay, well, one, I don't have my color rough next to me, where I developed a color rough of where I wanted to go.
Yep.
And now I'm doing my painting. I don't have my roadmap.
Yep.
Why don't I have my roadmap here? And then
Why?
the other is, I was mixing very small amounts of paint, running out of the paint.
That's not good.
Remixing.
Oh my god. That's
And I found all of my thought power was going into the palette.
Yep. That
rather than
you should not be. That should not be a thought process while you're painting. All that should be worked out ahead of time. Yeah. Obviously, is what you're saying, right? Because that you become preoccupied.
You preoccupied on the palette, rather than on the form.
Right. No, and you got to get everything out of your head. This is it. This is complex, and this is where it's all happening. That's why I could never figure out how people can paint on a palette. You always see this mixing colors, smearing them all. They look like a pile of glop to me. You know what I mean? There's nothing that I can see that. I don't know how people can paint like that. They do it, and it's like
They do
magic to
it.
me. It's like magic, you know.
They do it. Some people do it extraordinarily well. They
Incredible,
do.
incredible. It blows my mind.
Uh,
I have to have it all neatly worked out. It's all figured out ahead of every color I mix up for the painting. Each and every color is all thought through, figured out, and in excess of paint I mix up, and I don't
yeah.
waste that paint. Like I've got a lot of this blue and a lot of these oranges and yellows and umber ochres and raw sienna and all that stuff going on. And
Yep.
I'll save this stuff and use it for another painting. You know,
Yeah.
but you
So
can't have that be a thought process while you're working. My God.
yeah. So finally, I eliminated that. I was like, okay, let me get my color rough. Like, okay, I've already figured this out ahead of time. I mean, look at it. Oh, this is where I want to go. I mixed up my colors. I'm mixed up enough. I'm like, yeah, because I was like, man, I talk to this guy every week. He lays all of these nuggets of information. I've known him forever now. And I'm like, just mix up the damn paint.
Don't be afraid
So
of.
once I did it, it was smooth sailing.
Yeah, I'm telling you, any artist out there, a lot of it, you'll never go to waste. You'll use it on something else. That's the way
Yeah.
to look at it. But as
You know,
far as that whole business of you look at it and it looks okay, then you can look away. You can go over, do something, go get some coffee, come back down, come back over, look at it. Oh God, that's horrible. And it happens like that, just boom.
and almost every single time,
Yeah.
right? Like,
Oh yeah. It's a
and this,
never-ending.
again,
You learned that that's just all part of the process, though. I used to trouble myself with it and go nuts and get all anxiety-ridden and crazy until you really realize that no, that's just part of the process. That's all that is. Just
yeah.
accept it.
And it's like,
Don't fight it. Don't fight it. Just go with it because that's all part of it.
yeah, because it's usually a matter of it just needs a little bit more work.
Yeah.
You just got to keep going.
Yep.
And again, I just finished that one. I started the next one, and as I'm going, thing, man, like, what is wrong? But then I realized that I actually did have a problem in the drawing of where I forgot to finish the floor.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm like, oh, I don't have a floor. I didn't draw the floor. That's why.
Well, that
Okay,
happens.
I need to figure out. I got to figure out what they're standing on. Like,
Yep.
what does it look like, so that it just grounds everything. And then I did some tinkering. I'm like, okay, blah, 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 blah. Whipped out my perspective lines back on the
Yep.
drawing, going,
Yep.
okay, there it is. I can now proceed forward.
That happens too in a lot with me. These days, especially more and more, I draw sometimes less and let it figure it out in the painting. A lot of stuff.
Yeah.
And sometimes you run into problems like that. God, I should have thought this through a little more. And sometimes it's like there's more. It's more fun for me, if you want to put it that way, is figuring it out here.
Yeah.
Just let it kind of figure it out here, and but that thing about it never being always going to look like a piece of crap, and it doesn't look like a piece of crap is never ending. And I know I've said this before many times, but the thing I read an interview with Andrew Wyeth in Horizon magazine, and I think a 1960 issue, if I remember right, I still have it, is where he talked about how he waits to that point. Hopefully, it's at the end of the day, near the end of a work day, that it looks good. Then he gets up, jumps right up, covers the paint all up, puts the lights all off, leaves the room. That's what I do, and then I won't look at it again. Like maybe I'll have more work to do because it's maybe 4:00, say, or something like that. Because I have a regular schedule. We all people.
Yeah, you do. Yep.
Just a regular schedule like everybody else. And then I'll go over to my drawing board over there, but I will not look up at the painting. I'll keep my eyes.
You go so far as to cover it?
No, I don't need to. I don't need to cover it because I just know I won't look at it. I don't look at it. I go look at my drawing board and work over there like this, and I'll walk out of the room and I will not look at it because the last time I looked at it, it looked good. And I know damn well the possibility that if I look at it again, it'll look like crap. And that at the end of the day, I don't want that to happen. Because if it looks like crap at the end of the day, you leave it and you're upstairs, you go eat, you go whatever else you're doing, it's sitting there in the back of your head, gnawing at you.
It's true. It's true.
Yeah,
And then you come back to it. Do you find that if you leave it with that gnawing, that when you come back to it, that feeling is still there? Or
no, I sometimes, yeah. Well, mainly what I feel is sometimes, a lot of the times, the gnawing will stop and then it'll settle down to a more thoughtful, logical process of working it out. Oh, maybe that was it. And so when I come back and I look at it, I see something, I know it's wrong, and I fix it. If it could be something very subtle, like you with the floor. There's you don't have to sense that it's grounded, or it could be a million things. And you suddenly get it, and it comes to you. There, I got it. Yep. It works. So it's all kinds of ways, but that process is never ending. It's the way it goes.
Yep. Ben, sorry, I'm having one of those days where I can't pronounce last names, so my apologies. Ben says, Greg, I have to thank you for sharing your knowledge. I have a commission of a pinup, which I never painted before, and looking at your process video helped me tons. So,
oh, good. I'm glad.
Yeah. That's why you do them, right?
That's why I do them, yeah. Pass along the know-how.
Yep.
To pass along the information that I've gathered, if anybody wants to use it. That's the way I look at it. Yep. I just gathered a whole bunch of information myself over the years, and I hand it out if somebody wants it. That's why I feel when I taught for a while at Joe Kubert School. That was my approach. Yep. I've got information here I've gathered over the years. If you want it, I'm going to give it to you.
And you're very good at that. You're very good at succinctly, boiling the information down and putting it out there.
Yeah, I think you approach it very logically. In the way I work too, it's like people say, well, when you mix your colors, you work with complementary colors for your shadow. There's all these complex ways that you work from your highlight to your shadow, the darks and how you use blah, 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 blah. And I've seen people, long dissertations, and they pull it off, and they've done it over the centuries magnificently. So out of necessity, I think working with a twin brother, we had to come down to boil it down to a very direct, simple approach, which is easily communicatable.
Yeah.
Easily communicated. And I thought I found that when I was teaching for a few years, that I could pass that information on, because Tim and I had evolved this very succinct methodology. Highlight, color, shadow color. True color of the object in the middle. The true color of the object is affected by the highlight, by the shadow color, or whatever way that it goes. That moves in darker. The true color of the object is affected by the color of the light source. Is the light source warm, or is the light source cool? The true color of the object, in this case, this cream-colored skeleton, goes to these colors. And it's very logical how that moves. This color is a very logical progression to the shadow. This color is a very logical progression to that shadow. There's just stages, steps. Doom, 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 doom. That's what I went to Disney to give a talk. They invited me to come there like in 1990, I think it was. And Gene said, don't give away your color theory. And I said, okay. And I went there and I gave away my color theory. And I had paintings that displayed this kind of cool light, warm light, moving towards the shadow. And I laid it out for them as talking to animators,
Yeah.
That animators do an extreme drawing. Here's this drawing. Here's your other extreme. Here's your breakdown in between. Then your in betweens, depending on how fast or slow the motion is. And I said, colors. highlight color, shadow color, true color of the object. Three values up to the true color of the object from the highlight color, 3 or 4 values downwards to the shadow color. And I had a display of that, and I drew it all out on a blackboard for them. And they utilized that for the next film. A friend told me that was an assistant animator there on their next film.
Well, from that time forward, that your lighting scenario has altered not just Disney's animation, but DreamWorks animation.
That's what people have told me that have worked there. Yes.
You know,
I don't know if you could see it. I mean, when Shrek came out, I don't know if you could see it.
Shrek is the first one that pops into my head.
Shrek, and some of the people that worked, key people that worked on that film, came up to me at a show that we were doing in California, and they said, "I don't know if you could see it, but your work influenced that film." And you know, it's like I've said this before. I think on the show when we talk, it's like the double F. You're flattered and in the same breath.
Yes, it's nice to be acknowledged by someone at some point, but it might have been nice to be acknowledged ahead of time.
Well, you know, just on a practical. I mean, but that's it. I think all of us, we all borrow from those people who we admire.
Yeah,
and
of course.
And I guess their work, you are what you eat, right? Kind of like thing, and you are what you look at in your lifetime as an artist, and that shows up, I suppose, in your work. I guess you know what I mean. I don't
absolutely
right. So I guess it's that kind of thing.
Yeah,
but I never.
I mean, sorry. Go ahead.
I think it may. I think it's a different story possibly for a living artist to be told that, as opposed to, you know, if there's a dead artist that you're admiring from 1,000 years ago or 500 years ago or 100 years ago, they're no longer here they don't need filthy lucre anymore, you know.
Yeah, and I mean,
it's practical. That's all.
It is practical, and again, you know, you're there. You gave a talk, you know, and yet there's nothing tangible acknowledging the fact.
No.
You know, and you know, I mean, in Shrek, if anybody, you know, watching this has watched the movie Shrek, come on, that's Smaug. That's Smaug the dragon. You know, that whole scene, like that is the equivalent. That whole scene of when they go in to meet the dragon, you're walking into a Hildebrandt painting. You know, it's done in the style of Shrek, but the lighting of everything, the color palette of everything, you're walking into a Hildebrandt painting. And
to say nothing of Lord of the Rings.
Say nothing of Lord of the Rings.
Which I don't normally say out loud too often.
Yeah.
But it's a fact, Jack.
It is, and it's one thing of sitting on the sideline and saying you think it versus having people that were there
tell you
working on it.
It was so
telling you. Yeah.
It's a whole other world. And you know, it's like you grin and bear it or bite the bullet or what the hell ever you do. I don't know. Just keep trucking. You know, I don't. That stuff sits there, and I talk about it once in a while, like we are right now. And I don't walk around with my head or rancorous or anything like that. It's not that. It's a fact. That's all it is. It's a fact. It's a fact.
And I could see how it would be very easy to brood over that stuff and let it eat at you and let you become.
Certainly negative. Artists. You know. Yes, artists. Fortunately, I have Gene, because Gene, for over 40 years, has made sure that I stay working. She's a fantastic agent, manager, keeping me on an even keel in terms of my work and inspiration and adding to my whole world and life. And how many artists don't have that? How many artists talk about greats who? How about Schuster and Siegel, for God's sakes? Joe
Yeah,
Schuster ended up
we've
as a
talked about that.
delivery guy carrying packages around New York, going blind.
Yep.
Jesus Christ! You know, that, and everybody took it and ran with it and created an entire. Look at the industry that sprang from that
Yep.
$1 trillion industry.
Yep. Like the value of those logos alone, just the logo,
Yeah,
you know.
and on and on and on. I mean, how many artists like that have been, you know, the people that work on the films themselves, you know, the designers. I've done some couple of posters for movies, post production, big deal, you know. But the ones who've designed it, I mean, granted, they go in the front door knowing and sign contracts and agreements that that's it. They're work for hire, basically, right?
Yeah.
And but still,
But still, you go into something a lot of times too when people are young, you know, when you're going in young and you have no idea if something is going to hit. I can't. There, at what point, if you own a property, like, do you acknowledge I would have had nothing without that guy right there?
yeah,
You know, maybe I need to throw him a little bit more of a bone.
right,
You know, and when I sold this for $4 billion, you know,
yep,
maybe that the guy who designed the entire look of my words,
uh huh,
you know, like,
yep,
yeah, you know, oh, okay, yeah, great. We kept the merchandising rights. Well, the merchandising is all toys and product that all of those things are based on someone else's
yep.
designs
It's
and work, you know, like,
it's
yeah,
a that's the way it works. That's the nature of the
it
beast.
is the way it works, but it doesn't have to be. It doesn't have
Oh,
to be the way it works.
nothing has to be the way it is. The human race and the human condition doesn't have to be the way it is, with racism and hatred and intolerance and economic disparity and no, it doesn't have to be that way. It's all choices people make. It isn't coming
No,
from outer space. It's internal. It's here. It's here. I always come back to that kind of statement about what Bishop Sheen. He's going to apply this to ethics and morality and war and peace and hate and race. Is the Bishop Sheen analogy? He said, imagine a long line of humanity that goes way back to the beginning. Somewhere down the line, somebody hits the person next to them. That person in turn turns to the next person, to them, hits them. That person in turn hits the next person. That comes all the way down the line to you, and you don't pass it on.
yep,
And
yep,
it's as simple as that.
yeah,
That sounds like people say, "Oh yeah, oh yeah, okay." That's as simple as that. You stop it. You don't pass it on. You don't. You're ethical. You're right. You're righteous. You're not hateful. You're not bigoted or prejudiced. It stops here for every one of us. People don't do this. People point that way. They did it, or that group, or that race, or that religion, or that political party, or this, or that country. Or that. No, no. Point it here. This is where it starts. Each and
yep.
every single person on the planet. There's my lecture for the day.
It's a good lecture, man. That is a good lecture. We've got another question here, and I'm not sure the entire answer to this. Has there ever been a book that is just about your painting method?
No, not at all. I mean, Gene's, we've been talking about this for a number of years to do it finally. And there's so much, again, all the stuff that you become involved with, the higher
Yep.
thoughts or ideas that
Numerous.
you may have becomes
Yep.
postponed for momentary making a living things that are always there. Now, but there, yeah, we're planning on that kind of stuff still.
I mean, there are probably tidbits of information
On YouTube,
in all of the various books,
yeah, in books
right?
and on YouTube, stuff like
you
that
know,
where I've talked. Yeah,
yeah, but
yeah,
not
there
in
are
a,
there are the various books in the Watson Gupto Lord of the Rings, the making of the Lord of the Rings art for the calendars. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff, and then the Marvel book that just came out
yep,
that's still for sale. The Marvel
yep,
art of the Brothers Hildebrandt. There's all stuff in there too. Yeah. So, yeah.
yep. Yeah, hi from Scotland. Let's see. I'm looking through these.
Scotland.
Get you back up with the. Okay, sorry, talking to someone else. So I'm reading through some of these comments, just catching up, making sure we're getting everybody, um, getting everybody answered as much as possible here. Uh, but anyway, so we are at 5:10, 5:11 now, sir.
Yes, we are.
Um, the time flies by, man. I
Well,
always have a good time chatting with you.
I love talking with you, Keith. And I mean, I try to do a little bit of work. I did get the highlights painted on the gun here. You can see it's building up. I'll build up to a little shine, brighter shines. The brightest shines, they're going to be on this eye and the highlights on the gun. Little pinpoints of light, where that metal, that shiny metal, gets
Yeah,
it.
very cool.
And that'll be it.
You said you'll probably finish this up tomorrow, correct?
Yeah, I'll be done with this tomorrow.
And then, do you know what you're going to be working on next week yet?
No idea. I know I'm finishing off a magic card, but they don't want to see that because that card set's not of which you are working on. What, 2 paintings also,
Yep.
right?
Yep, that is correct.
And they don't want them seen, so I can't work on that. So I have no idea. There's several things that are on the agenda here, and I think some commissions and something that I want to get going. A couple of things that I want to get going on my own, but I don't know what the hell it's going to be. That's again the thrill. I'll find that out,
Yep.
around the corner, around the bend. But there's that aspect of it, don't you think? I don't want to know what the hell's around the bend. I don't want to have any idea what, because if you've got a time machine, I wouldn't want to go into the future. It's like I don't want to know what the hell's there. I mean, I want to find that out when I get there. That's the kick.
But would you ever want to go beyond? Okay, so we know that we have a limited time. You wouldn't want to see like another 100 years from now, like.
Oh my God. Hey, look if I sat down, if it really became a reality, it's like I certainly would like to go far enough into the past to see the dinosaurs. That would be that. I would like to do that.
Okay.
And yeah, but the thing is, to go into the future, you have to be careful going into the past. Though, like in that time trip story that was in EC Comics. Remember,
Yes.
and I think they made a film on it too. You go into the stay on that. They go, but right, he comes back to the future and everything because he stepped on him.
You can open a portal bubble, you could peek through, but you can't affect anything.
Not only affect anything, but what do you do? Here's the problem: you can peek through and see the future, and then come back to the present, knowing the future. You're going to be like, what the hell's her name? The Greek goddess. Shit. Somebody knows this. I know it as well as Paul created that character in one of his rock operas. That she can see the future, but nobody believes her. So you'd be able to see the future, then come back to the present and say, "Oh my God!" It's like in the Dead Zone,
Yeah.
You're the only one that can see this horror that's coming up, this atomic destruction. You got to come back and off this guy before it happens. It's like there. That would be a nightmare and a half, wouldn't
it? It would. And you know what's a different story of that same effect? It just flipped right into my brain. It's from the Bible. When the guy, I think I don't know if he's a rich man or whatever, goes to hell, and it's like you can't shoot. It was all right in my head, and then it just went
boom, out. That happens.
But yeah, basically, yeah, it's like, can I just tell people? Can I warn people? And it's like, no.
No, you can't. And besides, that's it. You're stuck with it. You and you
Yeah.
alone know it. And if you start to talk about it, people are going to say, "Yeah, your mind. They'll lock you up. You're insane." You would go stark raving mad. What's that
Yeah.
goddess's name, for God's sakes? Jean? 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 No, I'm going to ask you a question, hon. What's the white goddess in Night Castle that transforms and she's becomes the white?
Fate?
No, not Fate. In Night Castle.
Cassandra.
Cassandra. Cassandra. Okay. Cassandra. Right.
Yeah.
She can see the future, but nobody believes her. Yow. That would be a freaking nightmare, man. You could see. No, I couldn't deal with that. I wouldn't want to deal with that. If you went to the
Yeah.
future and decided, well, I got to stay here then because I can't go back there and go crazy. Well, now you're told. You talk about being an outsider. You, you're, you know, it's like, oh my God, you couldn't relate to
The other
anything.
thing that just popped into my head, but on the totally humorous side of things, right? I don't know if have you ever heard of Key and Peele?
No,
Like a sketch comedy show on
Nope.
Comedy Central.
no.
And there was a bit where like they became like vampires, right? And they're all done up like from an Anne Rice novel, with the
Okay.
Victorian stuff,
Yeah,
all the
yeah.
flowery,
Mhm.
and they're talking all this, and the one guy, he's just like, yeah, I just wanted to see future cars. So
Yeah.
all this like immortality and all this stuff and the fancy, and he chose to become a vampire just so he could see future cars.
Well, anyway, of course, I love all the science fiction and fantasy writers and arts and films that have projected the future. That is to say, the future that never was and never will be, because
Well,
it's
a lot
all
of them
fantasy.
projected a future that is.
That is, yes. But I'm saying, the way that flying machines look and all that stuff. If you take some of the Jules Verne stuff, yeah, but it's like it doesn't look that way now. It doesn't, you know. Look at the Krell on Forbidden Planet. Remember Krell? When they get
That
the movie.
I know the movie. I know
Well, they
the
land on the
robot.
planet, and the Krell is this gigantic machine inside the planet. It's the size of the planet. In other words, nobody projected at the time of the making of that movie miniaturization.
Yeah.
Right? Machinery had to be, which is much cooler. When you see and when you boom, 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 things moving down up shafts and tiny little figures walking across huge walkways, that's a lot better than a computer chip as far as drama for
As far
imagery,
as drama, yeah.
right?
I was listening to Neil deGrasse Tyson,
Yep.
him,
Yep.
with him talking about UFOs and saying, well, one, if they could come here, there's chances are we probably never know, because they would probably know about nanotechnology,
Yeah.
and they would come so small that we would never
You wouldn't know
we'd
it.
never even be able to see them. Oh, wow, that makes a whole lot of sense.
Yeah.
The fact, like, maybe they're not in spacecraft that looks like it would be the size of a man.
How about all this stuff that they keep revealing now that the Pentagon is revealing on all this UFO stuff? What's with that? What's going on with that? Why
I
are
don't
they
know. It's
revealing?
interesting.
Doesn't seem to be.
Yeah,
Whatever. That's a whole. Here we are talking about all kinds of
yeah,
interesting things that we could.
I had a conspiracy theory about all of that.
No, not another one, man.
Total conspiracy theory. I don't actually believe it.
That's good.
So anybody that's watching this or watches this in the future, I don't actually believe this. I just think it would be a great conspiracy theory. They know aliens are coming, right? They know they're here, and it's totally based on a War of the Worlds. Like, what took out the aliens in War of the Worlds was the virus.
Yep.
So so they have to put coronavirus out there, get us all inoculated for it, so that when they finally reveal that these aliens are coming, because they're going to be here, they're going to use the coronavirus to wipe out the aliens. Again, I don't believe this.
Thanks
It's just
to
something that popped into my head one day
H.G. Wells, Orson Welles,
because
and
I
George
like War
Powell.
of the Worlds. I love War of the Worlds. So that immediately pops into my head.
With that
So
beautiful
that's-
that narration by Sir Cedric Hardwicke at the end of George Powell's War of the Worlds, killed by those
Yeah.
littlest things that God in His wisdom had put upon the earth, and the church bells chiming and the sun's rising. It's fantastic.
Yeah.
I love
I
that
mean,
movie. It's one of my favorites.
you know, I've read the book of it. I've looked at a lot of art based on it, but I got to say that the radio drama
Oh, Orson Welles
still is my favorite.
It's incredible. I did that, and my parents had a book called Pause to Wonder. I should look it up, see if I can get a copy of it. It was a bunch of fantasy writings and poems and stories throughout time, and they had the entire script from Orson Welles' War of the Worlds in this book. And Tim and I did it on tape. We read it. We did it on tape. We had 2 tape recorders, and we'd create the crowd sounds by just constantly mixing tape and doing the crowds ourselves for the background. And the way it's a news broadcast, we take you now to Ramon Raquello and his orchestra in the Park Meridian Hotel in downtown New York. Some music would start to play. We interrupt this to bring you a special bulletin from, and we did it all like that. Did the whole show, and then Tim took it into his history class in high school. He talked about it in the history class, and the history teacher will bring it in. And he was in that class right next to the wall, and I was in the Latin class in high school. And Mrs. Posey, she was this old lady. She's Mrs. Posey, and she was a nice lady. Don't get me wrong. I'm just saying. And in the class next door, and they had it blasted up real loud with all of our screeching rays and explosions and everything. And she's, what's going on in there? What are they doing? It's like, I said, there's a Martian invasion going on in the next class. But Wells's thing was, and they kept banging at the doors. The cops were all in there trying to get him to stop the show, and he had the doors locked until they got to the break point, and then they announced it. That it was.
Well, it was great that they announced it ahead of time.
Yeah,
that it was
right.
a radio show.
But if you turned it
not
in,
again until that.
Because if you turned
until that break.
Yeah, because if you turn the radio on, say, "Oh, let's go turn the radio on," and there, ladies and gentlemen, we interrupt this program. It sounds like a news. Then you go to music playing, and then another news broadcast interrupts. So you think you're hearing a real thing, and I think here the Martians landed in Grover's Mill, New Jersey.
Yes. Yep.
And I think some farmer went out and shot a water tower. I think it's still there, if I'm not mistaken. He took his shotgun out and he thought it was a Martian tripod. I think it's fantastic.
It's amazing that they were able to get away with that. They gave one warning, and then, but today we have warnings on a can of peanuts that they actually contain peanuts.
Exactly. This also they have seen things on like milk cartons, gluten free. No kidding.
Okay, can I let you guys know that it's 5:30?
Yeah, we've been bullshitting about.
Well, yeah, you were on the phone, Gene, so we were waiting for you.
Yes.
Oh, so it was my fault. I'll take the blame. That's fine. I don't know what just happened here, but I clicked on something and I got windows all over the place. Okay, so are you done? Did I interrupt something?
We were having all kinds of.
We were just having fun in the conversation now.
Are there still people? Are there still people listening?
Yeah.
Okay.
Do we have to do a closing?
I will do that right now. So
go ahead.
Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for listening to Greg's wisdom and then our collective musings and the silliness that comes about. If you're interested in a commission or purchasing prints or posters or any of Greg's art, please check it out at spiderwebart.com. If you like what we're doing with the live stream, again, please like, subscribe, share it around with your friends, let people know what's up. Leave any comments, constructive criticisms, questions. We appreciate everybody tuning in week to week and saying hi to Greg and all of that stuff. So once again, thank you, everybody. If you have not checked out makersplace.com/Greg Hildebrandt, that is where he did his NFT drop last week. So you could still see them available, people making offers on those. On portion.io, he has his Ring of Galadriel NFT drop there, which I think is still available for that one is not for like bid offers, but it does have a set price. So you can check that out if anybody wants to own a Galadriel NFT. There is a promotion just going on today. If you buy the remarked edition of the Marvel art of the brothers Hildebrandt, you get a free Venom master print with your purchase. So that is pretty cool because it is an awesome print. It's got a lot of cool artwork on it. So again, thank you all. Have a great night and enjoy the rest of your week. Greg, as
Good
always,
weekend.
pleasure, sir.
Great talking with you, Keith. See you,
Thanks,
everybody.
everyone. Good
I'll talk to you
night.
later.